We're joined by my friend, Logan Burke. Logan, what's up,
What's up,
man?
Wyatt? Thanks for having me on, dude. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited that you came on to share your story with us, man.
Yeah,
So, real background on me and Logan. We both kind of went to we went to Brad, right?
yep,
Same
yep. Same
PT,
PT.
in Boys Town, and we honestly just like met, like what, like a month
I would
ago?
say a month ago. I've heard of you before because
Yeah.
your picture is up in the new neuroscience lab. Um,
Oh,
so
yeah,
I had
yeah.
heard quite a bit about you. Yeah, but I think we met last month. So new friendship.
Yeah, just going to the same PT in Boys
Hmm.
Town, and it's kind of cool how we just connected, how Brad
Yeah,
connected us.
absolutely.
But yeah, so Logan and I, we both have cerebral palsy. Very hard word to say. I just call it CP
I
all the
do as
time, you
well.
know?
I hate it.
I do. Yeah, it's like, I don't know why they made the word so hard to say. It's like, you could have made it
Yeah, you
easier.
definitely could have figured something else out, right? So, yeah,
Yeah,
I know
definitely.
CP norm. I don't know. I figure it out. I tell people a whole bunch of stuff, right? So, mm,
Right. Yeah, do you ever like make up, like, people always ask you, and you're like, you make up stories like, oh yeah, I got
yeah.
attacked by a
Oh,
shark or something like
I've,
that.
yeah, about the age of between 8 to 12, I became pretty witty with my responses because I was being asked so much that I realized that people don't have the guts in that moment to be like, that seems a little weird. So we've got a couple like BMX bicycle backflip accidents. There is one confirmed believer
Mmm,
of that I was bitten by a shark because I have quite a few scars on my left leg, and so
no
I do
way.
have evidence to back up my weird shark story. So yeah, no, you got to have
Yeah,
fun with it. Absolutely. Yep.
definitely, dude, definitely. So yeah, Logan, just tell us like where you grew up, kind of like how you were also diagnosed, but just also stuff outside of your CP, what you were into as a
Yeah, man.
kid.
So Omaha, born and raised.
Hmm.
My CP story, I'm actually still learning the origins of how that all happened as I have gone through this mental health kind of growth um, spurt, I guess, or path this last couple of years, and we'll get into that. But I was diagnosed with spastic diplegia, CP. So there's three
Okay.
different kinds: spastic diplegia, so the left side of my body, and then my right leg. So the
Okay.
only able-bodied limb I have on my uh, is my right arm, my right side.
Oh,
So
okay.
relatively mild. That was due to a lot of PT, a lot of surgeries. I think I've had 7 surgeries, which is probably low numbers compared to you from what I've heard. But uh, yeah, was diagnosed. I always assumed that I was diagnosed at birth. That is not the
Okay.
case with me. I had a stage 4 brain bleed on
Mhm.
the right side of my brain, which is why it affects the left side of my body primarily.
Yeah.
But my mom didn't find out until my 6 month checkup or something that I had CP. The story goes is she was putting me into my clothes one day and my left leg wasn't bending quite as it should, right? And she's like, "That's a little weird. Well, we have this
Hmm.
checkup. I'm gonna go see this neurosurgeon and just see what's going on." Because they told my mom if I didn't have a brain bleed while I was in the ICU for 3 months, then I was
Okay.
probably good to go and I was going to be fine. That was not the case. So she goes to this neurosurgeon and she comes in, or this guy comes in and he goes, Ms. Burke, he had a stage 4 brain bleed. Like, no one told you? And she's like, no, no one told me. Like, something wrong because I wasn't crawling as quickly, and then when I would get to start to walk, I didn't even stand up till the age of 3. So
Wow.
my mom kind of leaves this doctor's appointment shook because this neurosurgeon told my mom, she's like, yeah, he's never going to talk, he's most definitely not going to walk, he's going to, he's going to live at home his whole life, and you're going to have to care for him. And going into that appointment just needing a checkup, like you can imagine, our
Hmm.
world was kind of shaken.
Oh
So
yeah, for sure.
that's the origin of my CP, and it's constantly evolving the understanding of what CP is, and now moving on, what it looks like, going forward. Because I didn't have anyone growing up who had CP that I could kind of look up to. Um,
But
got
yeah.
into adaptive sports. And let's see, I played wheelchair basketball starting in like fifth grade. So I had disabled friends, but that was only once per week that I was going and doing that. So that's a lot of your life. And fifth grade, you're already 13, what, that
Hmm.
12, 13, right? Um,
Yeah.
so it is tough, man. But yeah, that's the basics of my CP origin story.
Yeah, man, I can definitely relate. Like, we don't have anybody that we can like
Hmm.
turn to that has what
Yeah,
CP. I
yeah,
mean, you got your parents and they're always gonna be there for you and your siblings, but
hmm
it's like you don't know the pain I'm
yeah,
going through.
yeah,
Like emotionally and like
yeah,
physically. Like
yeah.
it's rough. But then so like growing up, what was it like? Did your siblings just they didn't really treat you any differently, just treated you like a like any
Yep,
sibling,
yep.
right?
So I have four siblings, one older brother, and
Okay.
because I was born early, we're actually only the age gap is only 9 months because
Oh
I
wow.
decided to come 3 months early. So we're pretty close as far as like age, and we just grew up doing everything together. So
Hmm.
my mom, being the lovely woman that she is, came home from that neuroscience um, thing and was like, okay, we're gonna get in-house PT, we're gonna do all this, and she really hit the ground running as far as giving me the best life that I could. As far as growing
Hmm.
up, I didn't notice that I walked differently until like probably third grade, where
Okay.
some kid commented on my run or had like mocked how I ran, or I might have even seen it on camera with like those handhold camcorders. And I think my
Hmm.
comment to my mom was like, "I'm never gonna run again" or something like that, because I was so embarrassed and shameful, right? And when it kind of like I had always been getting stared at, right, constantly from birth on,
Hmm.
but I didn't put it together why. Like I knew I wore this leg brace and I knew I was kind of slower, and that happened, and it was going back to what you're saying. You're like, oh, I really am the odd man out here. But as far as growing up,
Hmm.
did everything with my siblings. Played able-bodied sports until I got bad and too slow. So like third, fourth grade, that same time. Um, but yeah, that's something that I'm very passionate about now, and we can get into is we have the physical therapy side of CP down, but nobody
Hmm.
talks about the mental health side of being disabled and how you
Yeah.
go about that from a young age. My parents obviously parented the best they could with the knowledge that they had. Because one thing I've now realized that I'm older, they also didn't have a playbook for how to raise a child with
Yeah.
CP. So I have grace for them. Like they tried the best that they could. And then
Hmm.
life is hard, man, and people are mean, and
Yeah.
that's just how things go. So that's more of the early stages of my life, but stayed pretty active. And then I got into like gaming too. So that was a nice even playing field. I was like, okay, you'll probably kick my ass in soccer, but like let's go in and play Smash Bros or something like that, right? And it was a nice outlet
Nice.
for me in that way. So yeah.
Y- Yeah, definitely like the mental aspect of it. Like you and I, we kind of are the lucky ones because like we communicate
Hmm.
really well, but just like
Yeah.
physically. But do you ever think like would people ever come up to you and then all of a sudden talk to you like you were 5 years
Yeah.
old? And it's like, dude, I understand what you're
Yeah.
saying, you
There's
know?
a talking down to thing that happens with figures of authority, right? They talk to you like there's a cognitive
Right.
aspect. Um, Even after knowing me too, or people not treating you your age, it's very like just yeah, I think dehumanizing would be the best word to say it. You kind of feel because we get stared at when we walk, and then we're talked down to, so you almost feel like a zoo animal,
Hmm.
sort of, right? And
Yeah.
it's frustrating. the problem is too, and I think this was my biggest hurdle that I'm still just now conquering in my late 20s. When you're immediately told from birth the things you can and cannot do, either
Mhm.
physically or mentally or whatever, because your parents are trying to watch out for you, you believe those things. And you, in turn,
Yeah.
limit yourself because of the limits, albeit probably, meant well, but
Mhm.
the, I did not need other people to tell me what my limits, even when I was young, because it was very apparent what they were. But you can't go back and change things. But it's
Yeah.
my mission now is how do we give families or kids the ability to instill that confidence at a very early age. Um, and
Yeah.
I think it starts with people like you doing cool stuff like this podcast and people like me with some of the side projects that I have going on, meeting younger kids and showing, hey, we lived a full, successful life and we will continue to do so, right? So,
Right.
yeah, that's some of my just really early upbringing and then going into high school and college and stuff. But
Yeah. So like, talk about the mental health. Was there a moment or a story you can remember where like mentally you were just really struggling with the concept of like, oh yeah, I do have a disability. I am different than my friends. I communicate real well, but physically I'm just not
yeah,
quite there. And was it just really
hmm
frustrating?
that you talk about one story, it's almost my entire life. I had a little bit of naive optimism when I was younger because you're like 12 and below. It was when I went to
Mm-hmm.
high school that now all your grade school friends who know you and accept you for who you are, you now got to go through a completely different ecosystem with new people, and you're also still the only disabled person in the entire building. And you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if you know this, but teenagers are mean. Teenagers are
Yeah.
are just not the most kind-hearted people. So throughout high school, it was just tough because you've been beaten down metaphorically for so long. Um, I'm talking like I used to fall before I had all my hip operations and foot operations. I used to fall like every. I don't know if I can put a for sure distance on it, but I would fall at least like 12 to 13 times per day. I fell
Dang.
so much that I had to wear a football elbow pad on my right side because I broke my elbow from repeatedly falling. It was like,
Oh,
it was
what?
just, so when I say beat down, it's more the overarching self-doubt and the just low self-esteem really all came to a
Mm,
head in high school because it's when you want to belong, it's when you want to be one of the pals and do other things, and I just was not that person. And it was tough.
right.
There was the college more so is where things still didn't improve very much for me. But I
Mm,
think over there's not really one story as opposed to just frustration and resistance towards having a disability. So that
mm,
that would be one for me, and then college is where things all kind of went crazy. But yeah, that's how high school went for me. Not the best experience, but in hindsight, grateful for it because it got me here and with my mindset, right? So
right.
yeah,
Taught you how to be
yeah,
tough.
that's one
Like,
thing that I value very highly now. But we'll get to that in a second. So
yeah. So you go through high school and then you get to college. Would you say your confidence of like, kind of like, screw it, like, if I have this disability, I'm not going to let it like hold me back. I'm going to do what I want with my life. I'm not going to let doctors or anyone tell me
mm-hmm.
what I can't do. Would you say that's when your mindset kind of changed or
College
after
was
college?
interesting for me. So I didn't have the ideal high school experience like I had just stated. And I went down
Mm-hmm.
to UNL with a couple of my friends, and I met a really good new friend there. called vodka, and vodka and I got along pretty well because you can imagine if you're a socially anxious person like I had become because of the low self-esteem and low confidence, my good friend,
Yeah.
Barton's vodka threw that out the window. So we'll call it. I wasn't too focused. My first 2 years of college. Okay. And it was kind of a finding myself period. You're 19, 20. You have no idea what's going on. I still have no idea what's going on. So you can imagine back then was still tough. The moment for me, the college really beat me down because I wasn't academically successful for like the first 3 years. So I had failed out of
Okay.
Lincoln because of the lack of study skills, number one. Number two, I was 19. And three, I just had better things to do, like go hang out with my friends. Right? I was just
Yeah.
not concerned with college
Yeah.
at the start. And really, this undiagnosed depression that I had now in hindsight, when you don't have anyone to go to, you're going to look for outlets like that and you're going to try to go find them.
Mm-hmm.
And it really came to a head. I went out of state my second year to Southwest Minnesota State to play wheelchair basketball because I had failed out and I didn't want to tell my parents that I failed out. So I like finagled this plan to reset my GPA and go play wheelchair basketball. That was the biggest growth year for me because I had to learn how to study and get good grades to then go back to UNO, which is where I finished school. But you're five
Okay.
hours away from home. You had no friends. You just had this great year, at least socially, your previous year at a Big Ten school. And now I'm at some smaller school 2 hours outside of Sioux Falls by myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a tough year. I think there's a low self esteem, and then there's like almost a self hatred that can happen. Just
Yeah.
speaking from personal experience, I have resisted the idea that I was disabled and embracing that I was disabled and that CP actually benefited me. I wanted to change who I was. I spent all of high school trying to mold myself into somebody so that the football guys would like me or that I would get a date to the school dance. And then when you give up a part of yourself and you still don't get what you want, it's tough. And
Yeah.
so it came to a head at the age of 20 where I was so fed up with myself and the way that I looked. I covered up all the like mirrors in my dorm. I just covered them up because I was like, I'm not even
Mhm.
going to look. And it's super sad to say in hindsight, but that's where I got to. And it's like, if you have had this mindset for 20 years, that is what I would consider
Yeah.
probably my lowest point. I had made the decision there, if I can speak candidly, that I had been suicidal for so long. It had been kind of climbing. And you're just,
Mm.
you didn't talk about that in the, 2010s. And I had no idea, I just knew I was sad all the time and life wasn't going my way. So ironically,
Right.
this tendency to lose my battle with mental health was beneficial because my mindset was, well, you can always leave tomorrow. You can always leave tomorrow. And that was my like weird way of shifting my mindset. I don't know what kept me here, to be fully honest. Call it a higher power,
Yeah.
call it grit, call it whatever. But thankfully, I didn't make any choices. And so
Yeah.
you're sitting there, and I go through Southwest and I get that done. I start lifting weights at UNO, and I meet this guy named
Mm.
Derek. He's a big, when you go into the gym and there's like people that are in shape, and then there's that one dude where you're like, oh my God.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
like muscles
yeah.
on top of
He
muscles. It's
he was
like,
that guy, okay? And I had read this book by Mel Robbins called The 5 Second Rule. Okay? The concept of the
Mhm.
book is if you count down from five, five, four, three, two, one, whatever your anxious, fearful mind is telling you, go do it anyways. So for me, it was like
Mm-hmm.
introducing myself to people or putting myself out there. So I was at the end of my rope, like I just said. Like I was still not doing very well academically and just mentally still not doing well. And I was at the end of my rope. I was like, okay, now we're going to play all our cards because the cards could be gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I go and I count down from five, five, four, three, two, one, and I go introduce myself to this guy, Derek. Story short, I ended up doing a bodybuilding competition in 2018, like the like mankini,
Mm-hmm.
like the full thing, like the tan, the working out, and it was the first, yeah, it
Oh
was
wow.
pretty intense. It was the first time that I had ever willingly stepped out of my comfort zone on purpose. Like you're forced to do speeches in high school and college, and you're forced to go to some social gatherings. But this was my choice. This is what I was doing. I was like, holy shit! Like
Yeah.
I can do hard things. And so through this 5 month process of dieting, I showed myself that I can succeed at something. I obviously didn't place well at the bodybuilding competition, but that's not what it was about. It was about showing up and doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when things started to turn for me.
Right.
Was the end of college. Was really after that bodybuilding competition. People still to this day are like, "Sorry, you did what?" Right? Because it's hard to. I still sometimes I'm like, I can't believe I did that. Right? Because it was like you eat like
Yeah.
6 meals per day. I was working out like an hour and a half on top of going to college and doing schoolwork. So that leads to the end of
Dang.
college. So like it took me 6 years to go through college because I just like student debt, and my first 2 years didn't go very well, right? So it took me 6 years, but
Yeah.
in hindsight, yet again, the repeating theme of my story is, oh, it played out how it should have, right? Which I think is a great message.
Right.
So
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, like going through all that, like I mean, for me, I know like I couldn't hide my disability because
yeah,
of my hand. Like who could
mm-hmm.
see it? And you get like those weird comments. I mean, I consider myself lucky because I had a twin, so like my best
Mm-hmm.
friend was always right there. So
Yeah,
like he never treated me differently. But it's just like if you're going through it alone, and
yeah,
I still did.
yeah,
It's like it's hard, and you gotta go outside your comfort zone. And I think too, people like. I don't know. People would always ask me, it's like, what kind of
yeah,
disease do you have? Or like, they
yeah,
don't get the
yeah,
term, or it's like, well, it's a disability. I
yeah,
mean, I'm not
yeah,
like dying
yeah,
here, but it's like, I think people too are afraid to like
mm-hmm.
ask us questions.
Yeah,
And it's like, dude,
yeah,
I don't care. You can ask
yeah,
me whatever. Don't like,
mm-hmm.
don't like judge
Mm-hmm.
us by like
Yeah,
how we look. I mean, I get like, yeah, I've made jokes about my
yeah,
disability that because
yeah,
you
yeah,
make some good funny jokes. But I think like too, it's like with having our disabilities, we've gone through this stuff, but it made us like honestly, I think more mentally tougher than a lot of other people because like we just had to. Like if you wanted to get through it,
mm-hmm.
you had to be mentally tough to like, all right, this is how I am, this is how I
Yeah,
look, but I'm not gonna let it define me. And I'm like you, I had the doctors like, your kid's not gonna do this or not that, and you just gotta
mm-hmm.
prove the doubters wrong,
Yeah, yeah.
obviously,
It's something
right?
that when it comes to judgment, this is where it turned the page for me. It's human nature to judge, so I don't think judgment will ever
Mm-hmm.
be zero with anyone, including me, right? Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right.
So
We all
it's
judge.
how do we educate people and yourself? So educate yourself to have the confidence to be judged and kind of have it bounce off. And then how do
Mm-hmm.
we educate
Yeah.
people, because that judgment comes from a lack of knowledge, or you could just be an asshole, which is like a smaller
Right.
subset, but that's fine because we don't want to
Yeah.
be we don't want them in our lives anyways. But a vast majority is just
Right.
education on what CP is, which is where we come in. Like someone has to be
Mm-hmm.
naive enough to believe that it can happen, and that's my thing.
Right.
Is that just clicked for me within the last year? People aren't going to see your potential until you do. And I
Mm-hmm.
was looking for
Definitely.
external validation, high school and college, looking for extra, like, confirm that I'm capable, confirm that can live this full, fulfilling life. Tell me I have value, tell me I'm lovable, tell me whatever I wanted it to be. And it clicks because
Mm-hmm.
you really have to go on that journey yourself. My number one thing that I
Right.
tell myself every day is act before you are. Act before you are. So
Mm-hmm.
if I want to be confident or be a more confident speaker or have the validation, even if I don't feel confident, I need to show up and give that presentation. I need to show up and do this podcast. I need to show up
Yes.
and be myself in a work meeting, whatever it is. You're not, to get
Mm-hmm.
that goal of the things that you need, you have to be it. And in a roundabout way, you trick yourself, because if you're being it before you are, then you already are it. You following what I'm saying? Yeah, man, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah, it is.
yeah,
I mean, you just gotta like going outside your comfort
yeah,
zone,
exactly.
like doing this. I started this podcast, or like way back, I started a YouTube channel
Uh-huh. Yeah.
during the pandemic, and that's what kind of
Mm-hmm.
led into my other
Yeah.
podcast, and now this podcast, and just like it's crazy. Like it's not very
Mm-hmm.
comfortable right
It
away, but it
does.
changes your
It
life,
really
dude.
does. One thing that I find, a lot of solace in now is this concept of fine wine. It's my most important mantra that I
Mm-hmm.
have, that I'm probably going to get tattooed eventually here sometime soon. Fine wine. What does that mean? If you have this bottle of fine wine, you have to let it sit on a shelf for years and years and years and allow it to just mature into this beautiful bottle of wine that you have eventually, right? This gift. And I think no
Right.
one told us when we were younger, like, oh, you can have this very successful life. We're told what we're not supposed to do. And now I have this mindset
Yeah.
where I'm like, bitch, I'm fine wine. Like, I'm fine wine. And I
Yeah.
know, going back to what you're saying, going out of your comfort zone and being mentally tough, my mental state is so calloused now. I have built a temple, a card tower that cannot fall. That cannot fall because A, of the shit I've been through, and B, with how I carry
Mm-hmm.
myself now by acting before I am. And so you have this concept of,
Right.
I didn't want to live for probably a good 5 to 10 years of my life. And now I wake up every
Oh.
day and I'm like, oh, I'm fine wine. I'm stoked for whatever 30 and 32 and 35 is. I am only going to get better. And that's a beautiful way to think
Yeah.
about it. You're like, oh, the first 10 years for us, first 10 to 12 years, pretty rough. Shit, even 15. But like,
Yeah.
we're still very young and we still have tons of room and potential to grow. So it's just,
Exactly.
it's eye opening, right? To
It is definitely like when you're
Mhm.
just going through everything you went through, and now
Yeah.
got a different mindset. So, like, what did you major in college? Like, what is your
So
job
I'm in cloud
now?
computing, and I'm a security analyst for
Okay.
a firm here in town. I started out as a computer science major. There's a lot of math involved in that.
Okay.
Not sure if you know that, but I hate math,
Right.
and so I failed out of computer science, switched over to techie slash cybersecurity, and that's what I finished school with.
hmm
And I just so happened to get an internship
Okay.
at the bank downtown, the bank tower in their tech center, um, and their cybersecurity
Okay.
office,
Cool.
which has now led me to this cloud computing path that I'm on now. So, yet again, like, did not plan on this. Very blessed, and I really like my job and my coworkers and what I do, but um, definitely did not foresee this as what it was like 5 years ago, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever just like getting a job in general, whether it was in college, out of college, or in high school? Did people ever like not want to give you a job or look at you weird because you'd come in for the interview and
Uh,
they could see your disability? You're like, oh, we
um,
can't hire this guy.
they they didn't say it with their words, but but yeah, but
Right,
they say
right.
it
They
with
never
like their
do,
eyes and their
but
body language. Um, it's
mm-hmm.
something Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, really, because people don't.
Right.
It's very rude, and that would make them an asshole. But I would say
Right.
so. Sometimes when I get nervous, I get speech blockages and I stammer
Mm-hmm.
pretty bad. That was I've now figured out
Okay.
is through like different just bullying and general anxiety, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't tell people this going into job interviews. I didn't tell people I had CP, right? Because I was afraid that they're going to be kind
Mm-hmm.
of like skittish and not know what to think. And then I would go in and
Right.
bomb these interviews because I'm nervous. I'm not embracing who I am, right? And I'm not showing up
Right.
as me.
Yeah.
And then they're awkward and I'm awkward and my speech is all messed up. And so, to answer your question, I really only had or got success in jobs when I went in and was like, hey, I have CP. Feel free to ask me questions. Sometimes when I'm nervous, my speech screws up. It will work itself out. Like there's worse things.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, because I've embraced it and I'm okay with it, it happens so much
Mm-hmm.
less, right?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, if you would have just
Yeah.
told me
There you
this
go.
10 years ago, right? We would have just skipped all the other stuff.
Right.
So it's
I
just
know,
one of those
right?
things, man. Yet again, you learn as you go and try to evolve. But yeah, there's definitely been just like from dating to job interviews, you always feel like you got to like break the ice, and it's not a good feeling, right?
Right.
But it just is. It's less of a breaking the ice now, more of hey, this is me, take it or leave it kind of thing. So,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah,
Like I'd go into job interviews and like I'd be like,
uh
yeah,
huh,
I can only work part
yeah,
time 'cause I can't stay very long. And then like with me, like I have
mhm,
medical
mhm,
conditions on top of my disability, and so it's like I get
mhm,
sick like for a long time. So it's just hard
yeah,
to like I would
yeah,
be afraid to tell them. But like you said, like when you get to
uh
like
huh,
that college age,
yeah,
it's like man, who cares, dude? Like screw it. I'm gonna like this is me.
mhm,
This is my
yeah,
situations, but I'll show
mhm,
up to work and
yeah.
I'll be one of your best
Absolutely.
employees.
I think
So
one thing that the beautiful thing about CP is we have an incredible work ethic because we've had to do things and face resistance like since birth. So you get this ingrained work
right.
ethic of just that's who you are. And when you get opportunities, you don't flounder them because of just what you've been through and you're grateful for the opportunity. I think, too, is part of our jobs as well is I wrote down earlier this year on my 28th birthday is I wrote down what would I do if I couldn't fail? If failure could not happen, how would I carry myself and what would I do?
Hmm.
Fast forward 8 months,
Yeah.
I have a new job. I have gone to therapy for almost two
Nice.
years consistently, which has helped me drastically. Asking for help is huge. And then
Hmm.
there's this like what if of all you start writing down, you're like, okay, what if I couldn't fail? You begin to realize your fears or maybe old programming that you have. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, you can't get
Yeah.
a job if you have tattoos. You can't be a heavily tattooed and get a job. Okay, I went and did that. You
Hmm.
definitely can't, get
Yeah.
make a lot of money or have a good job if you have CP or you know if you need any accommodations at work, like no one's going to help you. No, you can, and I did, and it's like
Right.
my goal at the end. Well, not at the end, but let's say within the next 3 years, and I task you with this as well,
Hmm.
my friend, is I want to walk down the street, and we used to get stared at because people thought we were freaks or weird or talked down to us. I want us to walk down the street
Right.
and be so cool and so accomplished in everything that someone's gonna look and go, "Who is that motherfucker? Who do you know who that motherfucker is?" And I'm like, I'm that motherfucker. I, I'm the one that went and tattooed his neck and then was in Inks magazine for the first time. I'm that dude who ran a 5K with CP with his shirt off in the cold. I'm that dude who partnered with Boys Town and did a bunch of cool research. Whatever is in my next 3 years, whatever you can't do, I'm the motherfucker to go do it. And And it's just when you
Right.
embrace that mindset, you're like, holy shit, the world is my oyster, right? It's crazy, dude.
Yeah, for sure,
Thank you for
dude.
letting me go on that rant there, but
For Yeah, no
yeah,
problem,
that's
dude. I
right.
mean, I love your rant.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
been watching him on Instagram. Do you do your rant in the
yeah.
Hy-Vee parking lot, you said?
Because those originally started, I was just going about my day, and I go to Hy-Vee a lot because I live close and I don't like having a bunch of food. I'd rather just buy it for like 1 to 2 days. And these things just started happening.
Hmm.
I'd like check out at the self checkout and it would break and everyone would look and I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? Or like certain things wouldn't be on sale and I would go to my car and just rant. I'm like, why isn't this on sale? Or whatever it is, dude. There've been the whole gambit of things. And people are
Right.
like, these are hilarious. These are amazing. Right. And so,
Oh,
and
yeah.
now people have told me to start tagging them in the stories where I took some time
Yeah.
offline the last like 6 to 8 months, but I'm gonna start doing them again because people enjoy just I don't know shit that happens to me, right? But yeah, yeah, it's fun, dude.
Yeah. And yeah, like I'll tell my friends like
Yeah,
stuff that happened to me, like,
yeah, man.
really? Like,
Yeah.
and it's like, yeah, it was kind of funny, like, or like I
Uh-huh.
was in like the resource programs, and some of the stuff that would go on there and be like, do we go to the same school? It's like, yeah, dude,
Yeah,
like
you'll
we
be
get in
sitting
trouble
there
like
and you're
all the
like,
time.
dude, some of this stuff
Just like,
just it actually was a form of like starting to practice like presenting myself of I that's one thing that
mhm,
saved me too. I grew up in a pretty like witty, funny household where we're just constantly back and
mhm,
forth banter, and I think I get most of it from my dad. But I just have a naturally quick wit and sense of humor, and so that did kind of keep me
yeah,
grounded because you are, like you said earlier, you're able to laugh at certain aspects of yourself. And then I realized I was like, oh, I'm pretty funny, and I might as well just document this to A, get out of my comfort zone, and then B, maybe someone will like it. And turns out, both went through very well. So, yeah, yeah,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, my family's like that too. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
like I like
yeah,
dark humor. Like, I mean, people like I don't really get like, oh yeah, like
yeah,
I can come up with some really nasty jokes.
yeah,
Like, I wouldn't say them in public, but like to my family or my,
yeah,
my siblings, like they're hilarious. And
yeah,
it's like stuff I've gone through.
yeah,
That's like terrible at the time, but it like when you
yeah,
come up with a joke, like,
dude,
oh, that's pretty funny. Like one time, I was sick for like
uh-huh,
weeks, and my lungs were wheezy, and they didn't really know what I had, and I had some virus or whatever that came out. And my twin brother Wes is like, "You're like the perfect
it
candidate for
was
a new
great, man.
virus. Like,
Yeah,
look at you." It's like good point.
yeah,
That's a good point, actually.
you've already been through the whole gambit. Let's just throw one other thing on top. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like you're sick all the time. Your lungs are weak. It's just
yeah,
like
man.
you're definitely gonna catch like some virus that's just came out, and
Yeah,
it's like,
thanks, man. Yeah,
yeah,
well,
thanks, I
fuck you,
guess.
whatever. That's funny.
But yeah, dude, I mean, it's just like you gotta laugh at yourself, and like sometimes when we laugh at ourselves, it's
Uh-huh.
like terrible shit we've been through.
Yeah,
But it's like, oh, it happened like
yeah,
years ago. It's over now. You
yeah,
make funny jokes
absolutely.
about it. I
Yeah.
mean, when you're in the hospital, you can make a bunch
Uh-huh.
of funny
Yeah, I
like
mean, because you're
dark
sitting
jokes and
there,
just
you're
come
like,
up
I
with a
got all
bunch
the
of
time on my
stuff.
hands.
Yeah, it's like you're hooked up to all kinds of things.
Uh-huh.
People are
Yeah,
just
yeah.
poking
You're
around
like,
on you like
what
half
is going
naked, and
on?
just like it's like whatever. Just give me my pain meds,
Yeah,
man.
well, and you've
Just
done it
like
so much too. You've been around the
yeah,
block. Mine is, like I said earlier, don't fall very often anymore, just because I'm old and I don't know,
that's
know how
good.
to walk now, I guess. But like when I was younger, dude, it happened so much that I knew when I was with my good friends. It's super funny because people would stop and make sure that you're
Hmm.
okay, which is like okay, very kind-hearted. But they don't know, like, dude, this is the 20th time
Right.
today. Like, I'm fine. But my good friends, and you can tell which ones they were because they would just keep walking. They like don't even stop. They just keep walking. They're like, oh, he'll catch up, right? Because it happens so much. Or they'll like laugh or make some dumb joke. Or I started to do jokes too. Like I think when someone would ask me how I was, I'd say like I was testing gravity or something like that. Just like just something super quick and witty. One time in
Right.
college, I was there was this group of girls behind my friend and I was walking and I tried to make some joke and like strut like I have a strut. I don't have a strut. I have a gait, right? And I like tried to do something
Hmm.
fancy just to like make them laugh with my friend, and I like tripped, rolled over, and like got stuck on my backpack like a turtle. I was like just kind of stuck, and I tried to roll over, and I was like, "Well, this is absolutely the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to me. I'm never going outside again." And it was so funny, dude. So to your point, just making you know lightheartedness out of things that aren't like we would have gone crazy if you can't joke a bit about it, right? You gotta have some fun. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And people are always like, oh, you gotta be like kind and nice. It's like, dude, we've been through like so much
Yeah,
shit. Like, we
yeah,
can't laugh at our disability, or like people are like,
mm-hmm.
oh, we don't want to
Yeah,
call them disabled
yeah,
or disability. Is like, I
yeah,
have a disability. It's not that big a deal. Just, I mean, it's like saying you're
yeah,
ashamed of your skin
yeah,
color. You shouldn't be
mm-hmm.
ashamed of that either.
Yeah,
I'm not ashamed of my disability. But I think too, it's like people like us, like we said earlier, just letting him know, like, hey, you can ask us
yeah, yeah.
questions. It's all right. You know,
Sorry,
and then like,
no, just
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
being able
Uh,
to be a safe space for people to ask you questions because I've met other people too with
right.
something I'm not familiar with, and I'm scared to ask them. I'm like, oh, people
Hmm.
probably feel the same about me, and as much as I would like my
Right.
tattoos to make me look like a super intimidating Harley biker, they don't. Okay, I'm like a big
Hmm.
tattooed teddy bear, and I've fully embraced it now. I was like, okay, scary guy is not the path for me. So I I just try to be really open, and through being
Yeah.
vulnerable, like doing this, people feel more comfortable to ask you questions safely, which is how it starts, right?
Yeah. I think too, like people think like, and I mean, there are people with disabilities,
Mm-hmm.
like I play Special Olympics, and I mean, I qualify somehow for it.
Mm-hmm.
But I qualify for like Paralympics and
Yep.
Special Olympics. Don't know
Mm-hmm.
how they let me play. I'm happy either way.
Yep.
And like the intellectual disabilities, like
Mm-hmm.
some can communicate really
Yeah.
well, I guess, and some can't. So, but then like most of them maybe have a hard time communicating like us. So like, but then when they
Mm-hmm.
come to us, like, oh, we can't
Yeah.
communicate. It's like you can't assume that everybody can communicate. A lot of us
Yeah.
can communicate just fine. They're just like those few that maybe have a hard time problem. And if you do come encounter with somebody that does have a hard time communicating, like CP, I know, like the
Mm-hmm.
severe point of it,
Yeah.
like some don't communicate at all, right? Yeah, it's just like just treat them like you would any other
Yeah.
person, because it's like we
Uh-huh.
are adults here. Like
Yeah.
we're not. People always call us kids, and
Yeah.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
well, we're like
Yeah.
20, 30 years old.
Yeah.
I don't think we're
Exactly. I
kids,
think
you
the
know?
conversation starts with I used to kind of make myself feel bad because I wasn't bullied in the normal sense, being pushed into lockers or beat up or whatever you think of that would be. But now the conversation is also,
Right,
it's not what happened to you, it's what didn't happen for you, right? That's equally as difficult
right.
to not be included, to, be left out of certain sports or what things that you want to do or the support that you
Hmm.
didn't have from friends or whatever. And to your point, we're constantly having to adapt to an able-bodied world, and the
Hmm.
able-bodied world should be adapting to us because they're able-bodied. We're
Yeah,
I'm like, it's like, wait, you
yeah,
have both of
exactly.
your feet move like this. Mine don't do that. Mine, why? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
we
I'm like,
walk and run with
why?
limps. Like we look like we just got like beat up, and
Exactly.
like we're
Like
just
I
like
look like I got
dragging
pulled over from
along
a
and just
bar
like
all the fucking time. So you guys should be adapting to your speech comment. Okay, why does that person have to be frustrated and to talk to somebody? And it it should come from the able-bodied person to be able to adapt to them and that person's uh, needs, what however they get their point across, or what have you, right? It could be sign language, it could be the
Mm,
speaking tablets, it could be whatever. We need to switch the conversation to them adapting to us because that's how it should be. So
right.
it's just hard. Like we're just
Right.
starting to have these conversations now, and people are just starting to know what CP is. Like as little as the last 3 years, I haven't had to explain myself. Like when I say I have CP, people aren't like. Some people are like, "Huh, what's that?" But for the most part, because of I don't know, Breaking Bad, the guy in that show has CP.
Oh
Which used
yeah.
to be my icebreaker on dates,
Right.
actually. I'm like, oh, yeah, have you seen that show? And they're like, yeah,
Oh
like,
really?
had the same thing as Walter Jr. And it's so because we're having these conversations, it will get better and better. We just need to keep it going, right? So, yeah,
Yeah, for sure, dude. I mean, and then like I saw this one TV
okay,
show called Average Joe, but like
okay,
the son in it, he was in a wheelchair. Like he had,
mm,
and there's like you ever seen Speechless? It's like about
okay,
a guy with cerebral palsy, and he's in high school, and like you and I can relate to, but he used like a
yeah,
computer to
yeah,
talk.
yeah,
It's really funny. Like that's what's cool. It's like
yeah,
it's not this sad drama. It's a comedy, and that ran for like 3 seasons. And what's another one? Oh, I mean, you see, like now, like people with disabilities are
mm-hmm.
in more TV shows or movies. It's like more like,
Yeah,
oh, okay, it's not that big a deal, or like they do it
yes,
to like educate people. So
absolutely.
that's cool
It
too.
takes
But
during my rant earlier, I was like, I'm that dude that went and tattooed his neck and then got in Inked magazine as the first like person with CP or whatever. And it's like putting myself. You have to make
mm,
people notice. So if I get heavily tattooed and do cool
mm,
projects, whatever they are in the next couple of years, and similar to what you're doing, somebody's going to notice, and we're going to be ready for the opportunity. But
right,
I have to put myself out there. I can guarantee you, I'm probably going to be the most tattooed cybersecurity engineer with CP in the entire world. That very much makes me a one of one. And with how I carry myself, things will
yeah,
open up for us. Acting roles, adaptable clothing. I don't know about you, but I struggled with putting socks on
hmm,
for years. Don't even get me started on like snow boots, dude. 20 minutes at least of snow
oh
boots. It's
yeah,
like there's all these possibilities, and it gets me so excited. As you can tell, it's like
right,
there's two ways that you can look at this. You're like, oh my God, there's so much work to do, right, with this topic. Or two, oh
hmm,
my God, there's so much work to do. Let's
right,
fucking go get after it, right? And that's how I try to look at it.
right, right.
So, mm-hmm,
Yeah, definitely, bro. I mean, yeah, like you said, like all these opportunities, like, and yeah, like struggling with like clothing. That clothing, I think they had some.
mm-hmm.
I've heard like people have been trying to work on it. Like I have trouble like tying my shoes, so I found
Mm-hmm,
these shoelaces that
yeah,
already are tied. So I wear that on like my tennis shoes, and then that helps. So like
yeah,
you slowly see it coming along, and then like it'd be cool like if we would ever have kids or someone has a kid that has cerebral palsy someday, like they don't have to go through
yeah,
the stuff that you and I
mm-hmm,
went through. Like, oh, like this is available to them, this is available to them. Like I play Special Olympics, and there's all these opportunities now available for people like kids with disabilities that are 2 to 5, 6, 7 years old, where I had to wait till I was like 10, 12, maybe 15 years old to get
mm-hmm.
like in Special Olympics, but now it's like right when you're like 2 years old.
Exactly.
So just like anything, sports, out of sports, it's kind of cool to see like, and then like you're like unified sports. It's not just like disability people over
Mm-hmm.
here and non-disability people over here. Like
Yeah,
we're all kind of coming together.
yeah.
So it's
I,
really cool to
you
see.
know, I would
So,
like to create eventually, 5, 10 years, however long. I want that same mom who walks into that neuroscience or that doctor who told my mom all those bad things, instead of her getting all that bad
mhm.
news, I want that doctor to be like, oh, actually,
Right.
I said some really bad things to this kid back in '94 and his mom, but here's some info for his foundation. It's the like Wyatt and Logan CP Foundation. They have resources for mental health,
Yeah.
PT, sports, inclusiveness. Here's 3 flyers. Go contact them, and they'll help you with all your questions that you need. That's what I want, and it's going.
Yeah.
It's not.
That'd be
It's not
awesome.
even a want
It's
for
gonna
me.
happen.
It's more of a win. Going back to that like pyramid that I was talking about earlier, I'm
Yeah.
just constantly building it. It's my fine wine. That is my
Hmm.
fine wine, right? So that's my goal
Right.
is to have those parents walk into those meetings and be like, yeah, this kid's going to have a more difficult life in some areas, but the good news is he or she or whoever is gonna thrive in other situations. And here, go talk to Wyatt and Logan. Bing, bang, boom. They'll get you hooked up, and here we go. Right? Exactly. Yeah. So
Right. Definitely.
yeah.
So, so to wrap it up a little bit, what are you working on right now? Like, what projects or goals or dreams are you
That's a good
going through
question.
right now in
Right
your life?
now, I'm focused on some of my cloud computing stuff, but side projects, I would love to continue to work with either you or Boys Town in some aspect of getting the mental health conversation around disability really on the forefront of if we can't give
Mm,
the advice to the child because they're too young, how do we translate that to the parents? So I'm spending my time
yeah.
educating and documenting my own life to then hopefully give it to others. So I
Right.
am documenting my life through what we'll call it a book for now, but I'm not sure what form it will take.
Right.
But I think through telling my story, it gives other people the opportunity and they
Mm,
feel safe to tell theirs, similar to what you're doing here. So I'm pretty wide open with projects that I want to do. I'm going to let the universe guide me to where I think I need to be. And I also just want to say what you're doing here is really cool and really special. And I think, 1 year from now, this thing will be huge. 1, 2 years, however things play out. So just keep at it because the
yeah.
stars will align for you, man. Truly, they really
I
will.
will.
So, of course, of course.
Thanks, man.